Welcome back to Tower Talks. Continuing on with our election coverage, we look at some more candidates a little closer to home. José Garza attended law school at the Catholic University in D.C. He then later came back to Texas and witnessed firsthand some of the problems with our criminal justice system. Joining us today is Mr. Garza. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's just start right away with a very simple question.
Yep.
Why are you running for DA?
I started my career as a public defender on the border, both at the state and federal level. And what I saw in those jobs every single day is the way that our criminal justice system weighs most heavily on working class people and people of color. I spent a lot of time in our county jails, in our state jails, in our federal prisons. And I can tell you that our jails are not filled with the wealthy. They're not filled with the middle class. They are predominantly filled with poor, working poor, and people of color. And that is the way that our criminal justice system is currently working. I also began to realize that the practices that we have been using in our criminal justice system, the strategies that we have been using for the last 60 years, data has shown us don't keep us safe. And so I'm running for this office out of an enormous amount of hope of the kind of criminal justice system that we can build here in Travis County, and an incredible amount of disappointment that we are not farther along.
Yeah, so you obviously do see some problems in the criminal justice system overall. What are some of the biggest problems you see in Travis County in the criminal justice system here?
How long is this show? No, look, I mean, where to begin? On any given day here in Travis County, over 70% of people sitting in our jail have not been convicted of a crime. The overwhelming majority of them are sitting in our jail because they can't afford to pay bail. That means that we have a criminal justice system where people are locked up literally based on how much money they have. Right here in Travis County, 9% of our population is black. Over 25% of the population of our jail is black. Not only is that grossly unjust, but it makes us less safe. All of this is happening against the backdrop of a system where survivors of sexual assault feel like they are not being heard and they are not getting justice. Every single year, our district attorney's office brings more drug possession cases than any other kind of case. And all of these things are connected. For example, in 2018, the district attorney's office prosecuted approximately 40 cases of sexual assault and over 1,200 drug cases. That is a current snapshot of the priorities of our district attorney's office, and I don't think that that is in line with the values and priorities of our community.
Yeah, that is such just a 40 to 1,200. I mean, that's such a difference. And, you know, I know, especially in the last 4 years since I've been at UT, sexual assault and sexual misconduct have been a very large discussion here on campus. So I want to bring this a little bit more to a campus perspective. You have 50,000 students, a lot of them who are here registered to vote here in Travis County.
Right.
What student issues within the law might you specifically be focusing on? I know, like UTPD, for instance, is breaking away from APD and the DAs within Travis County, and will still, charge things like for small possessions of marijuana. How might you differ from what is currently going on with students?
Yeah, I think there are so many issues in our criminal justice system impacting young people every single day. And let's actually start with the issue that you raised, which is drugs, and then let's work our way through all of the issues that impact young people. At this point in our 60-year war on drugs, the data is overwhelmingly clear that every day a person stays in custody who is struggling with substance use, the likelihood that they will commit another crime goes up. Continuing to prosecute these offenses makes us less safe, and in the process of making us less safe, we also ruin the lives of young people with a conviction for possession of drugs. It makes it harder to fill out financial aid applications, makes it harder to get housing, makes it harder to find a job. So what I have said with clarity is that when we win, we will end the prosecution of low-level drug offenses here in Travis County. It doesn't make us more safe. In fact, it actively makes us less safe, and we know that the prosecution of those offenses disproportionately impacts young people. And people of color. And so we know that it is also time to start to build a criminal justice system where women are believed and survivors of sexual assault are treated with dignity and respect, so that we build an office that prioritizes violent crimes over low-level drug offenses. But I think there's a few other issues that impact young people. So our approach to this campaign is rooted in the simple belief that every person is capable of change. The human brain doesn't even stop developing until we're 25 years old. And so that is why I have pledged that I will never seek to certify a juvenile as an adult. I believe that we should treat kids like kids and make sure that we have a system where everyone has the opportunity to grow into their full selves. But again, prosecuting low-level drug offenses actively makes us less safe, and we should be prioritizing violent crimes like sexual assault, gun violence, and the like.
Sort of going more to like a big picture, obviously you've been endorsed by Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So that would indicate a good amount of support from the Democratic Party. Do you see any sort of appeal growing within the Republican Party? Sort of what are the numbers there? And obviously criminal justice reform has become a bit more of an issue that matters to conservatives and conservative policy institutes, with Trump signing the First Step Act. How do you see that translating to any sort of Republican support?
Yeah, so criminal justice reform is a bipartisan issue. What we know is that our failed war on drugs impacts rural voters just as it impacts urban voters. It impacts progressive voters, and it impacts conservative voters. We have seen through the lens of the opioid crisis the devastating impact that continuing to seek to punish people who are struggling with substance use has on households and communities. I was talking to one of our volunteers yesterday, and they told me that they were out knocking on doors, talking to people about the issues that matter in this campaign. They were talking to a libertarian voter, and he was excited about our platform. And so one of the things we have said right now, the government has the authority to seize your property before you're even convicted of a crime. And in fact, that happens every single day. You get pulled over, you're suspected of committing a crime. The government can seize your vehicle, any cash you have, regardless of the outcome of your offense. What I have said is that we will never use this tool called civil asset forfeiture prior to a conviction. We think at the very least, someone should say that you actually committed a crime before we take your property. That is a value that everyone can get behind, and we're seeing traction on both sides of the partisan divide.
Well, continuing on with Bernie, and specifically, this is just a question that had popped into my head.
Sure.
Because I actually saw you speak at a Students for Bernie event. It was either last week or the week before that. And one thing that I noticed, and even with our previous guest, Heidi Sloan, one thing I noticed is that a lot of candidates are continuing on with that rhetoric of it's not me, it's us. It's not me, it's us. Do you think that candidates are specifically trying to tap into this movement that Bernie is creating? I mean, especially in Texas, he's just, gotten to the top of the polls. Do you think that we could see a real movement and push by Bernie supporters to elect like-minded candidates with him?
I sort of got my introduction into politics as a young person. I was just incredibly inspired by the 2008 Barack Obama campaign. And I remember throughout the course of that campaign, President Obama telling us that we were the change we had been waiting for. And I think what we have to acknowledge is that what Barack Obama was tapping into were the same seeds that had been sowed by Martin Luther King, by Cesar Chavez, by activists and organizers who have been organizing for centuries, for decades in this country and all over the world. And it is absolutely true, and I'm incredibly inspired that Senator Sanders has tapped into this spirit, to the basic, simple idea that each of us has the power to change our community, to change our criminal justice system, to change our country. Obviously, I think Senator Sanders is not the only one who has tapped into that. And I'll just say, I'm obviously incredibly humbled and grateful to be endorsed by both Senator Sanders and Senator Warren. I am just as excited to have been endorsed by the young Austin Democrats. I am just as excited to have been endorsed by the University of Texas Democrats, by the Young Democratic Socialists of America here on campus. So the energy around our campaign is built by young people here on campus and all over this community. And ultimately, at the end of the day, those are the people that are going to get this movement across the finish line.
Well, I'm glad you continued on with endorsements because, obviously you've been endorsed by many local groups,
Yep.
but also national parties
Yep.
And candidates. So what do those national endorsements mean to you, and how do you think national attention might affect a local race like this?
Well, those endorsements are, they are validation of all of the people who have been out knocking on doors for us, all of the people. There are so many volunteers we have in our campaign who we met because we knocked on their door. And they come out and they knock on doors in their community for us. There are so many people who have given their time, their energy, and their hearts to this campaign. And so every time they win the endorsement of Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senator Bernie Sanders, some of the other national parties, it is a recognition of what they are building.
Yeah, so obviously one thing that is primary role of the district attorney is some degree of involvement with the rule of law. And so how do you see rule of law and criminal justice as like somehow compatible values, or are they somewhat mutually exclusive? How do they work together?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. The number one job of the district attorney's office is to keep our community safe. And so what's happening right now is that as a community, we are having a conversation based on the data and the evidence about what keeps us safe. I think for too long, we have been sold a bill of goods, and we have been told that the best way to keep our community safe is to lock up working class people and people of color. The United States accounts for 5% of the world's population and over 25% of the world's jail population, while at the same time, crime rates started to drop well before we saw this rise in increased incarceration. So what this is about is ultimately about our public safety, and it is an opportunity for us to look at the data and the evidence to see what really keeps us safe. Again, the data is really clear. When a person struggling with substance use stays in jail, even for a short amount of time, 3 to 4 days, the likelihood that they commit another crime goes up by 40%. That means that the practices, the strategies we've been pursuing for 60 years aren't working. So at the end of the day, this is a conversation about how do we best keep our community safe.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, Jose, so much for coming on this evening. Coming up, the panel discusses the Republican incumbents and candidates running for office and to look for in the polls when voting. Stay tuned.